Started. I'd like to welcome back Sola back to Glasgow. I'm very happy and thank you for coming along this morning. So Professor Sola Ajayi is an agricultural scientist and he is also the Deputy Vice-Chancellor at First Technical University in Ibadan in Nigeria, and he is accompanied with his colleague as well. Dr. Kimbiola, are you also an agricultural scientist?
No.
An ecologist, okay, but related. Okay, very nice. Shola's going to say a couple of words on some research that you've been doing maybe the last 3 years. I know as part of the Sustainable Futures in Africa group, and Sola is here as part of a Scottish Funding Council GCRF project that's working also in collaboration with Mo Hume in social and political sciences, and also Neil Burnside in School of Engineering as well, and also Nettie, which is here as well.
All right, perfect.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning. It's a pleasure to welcome everyone to this presentation. And I'll talk for the next couple of minutes, hopefully within the next 30 to 35 minutes, on land, mining, and community relations in the Global South, and with experiences from Nigeria. And I'll give some information about Nigeria in relation to the topic of the presentation, as well as the activities, as Brian said earlier on, that the SFA, the Sustainable Futures in Africa, that we have been doing, what actually was the background to the projects that we have implemented, and lastly, talk about the impacts of this in community relationship. And in this context of relationship, I'm going to be talking about the relationship between the community members and land, the community the relationships among members of the community, among themselves, as well as with policymakers. Nigeria is a relatively, on comparative basis, a small country in terms of land size relative to the population, and the annual population growth rate is still almost 3%. And more significantly, we have over 250 ethnic groups with diverse culture, languages, and that even variants of the same language sometimes you may not understand one another. And we have a very strong ethnic and cultural identities, and we seem to be more attached to this than to a common national identity. And as everybody knows, Nigeria is more famous for oil and gas and the attendant consequences. But over the last 1 decade or so, there has been a lot of effort, especially with the fall in oil prices that affected the economy of the country, because about 90% of revenue is derived from oil and gas, and when we had a price plunge, it affected the country's economy. That set the government thinking, and there was this effort to promote an economic diversification, and primarily through agriculture as well as extractive industry. And that itself has a historical background, because Nigeria had been an agricultural commodity export country in a few decades ago. And mining is not a new activity, or let me say the extractive industry. Even prior to the discovery of oil, there had been a lot of activities going on around that. And this is a recently mapped area of Nigeria in terms of mining, and we have over 3,000 active mining sites. While agriculture, like I said earlier on, we had done very, very well in agriculture prior to the discovery of oil. But even today, we also have that the country is blessed with a wide range of agroecological zones, from swamp and rainforest in the south up to northern Guinea savanna. So you have a range of crops, a range of agricultural activities, as well as livestock that can thrive very well in Nigeria. And we also do have some specific regional peculiarities in terms of both crops that we grow, food that we eat, and production. For example, kola nut is grown mostly in the southern part, but you find that a lot of kola nut is consumed more in the north. And in the eastern part of Nigeria, kola nut, you are a very special guest when they offer you a kola nut, and you don't reject that. It has nothing to do with religious affinity, but it's only very, very special guests that they offer kola nuts. But in the southwestern part where it grows more, there are a lot of religious biases against even the consumption of kola nuts. But when you get to the north, there's hardly any corner you go in the northern part of Nigeria, people take a lot of kola nuts. Cowpea, for example, is produced mainly in the northern part, but it's consumed more in the southern part, in ceremonies. And so we do have some of this that unfortunately have not been properly harnessed for development of the country. And like I said earlier, this is a map of the extractive or the natural resources that we have in Nigeria. And as you can see, across the entire country, we have a spectrum of solid minerals ranging from iron ore, gold, diamond, tourmaline, or precious stones in general. And across the entire country, there's hardly any sector or any segment of the country that does not have one or another mineral that can be extracted. And in view of the antecedents, the country in the area of mining, the government then decided to begin a revitalization, and that commenced with what they call the Solid Mineral Roadmap, which was launched about 8 years ago. And there were a lot of series of activity that also accompanied that. Notably, there was the Mineral Mining Act of 1999, and in 2004, there was a review of what we call the Land Use Act of 1978. But this vested land rights in the governor of each state, excluding only those areas that be held by federal agencies. And eventually we had a national mineral metal policy that was promulgated 2008 and up to 2014 to have that. So this is the background against which the Sustainable Future in Africa activities started. And of course, the SFA in Nigeria, before I moved to the Technical University, I was at Obafemi Awolowo University, and that's where the SFA started. So when I moved to the Technical University where Dr. Akibiola is, we also started another chapter. But we also had Women Environment Program, and Priscilla had also been here, the executive director of that organization, which is an NGO. And when we were in Uganda, Tade also joined us. Tade is a social worker at the Lagos University Teaching Hospital. We also have Samir, who graduated from here, and he is in Kano. He's also part of the SFA. So we have members spread across institutions, but we also have people in the private sector who are members of the Nigerian SFA. And so far, we have undertaken 2 projects. First, in Malawi in 2015, when we first met, we started with a scoping project, prioritizing challenges to development of mining communities in Nigeria. And the simple question we were asking, if mining is this important and profitable to drive economic recovery, why are those communities underdeveloped? And we wanted to test the hypothesis. Could it be that it's because the communities were not speaking with one voice? So we then said, okay, let's go and ask different stakeholders. What are the priorities for the development of the community? And following from that, we then developed a follow-up, dynamics of development in Nigeria and mining communities in Nigeria. And the simple research question we're asking ourselves is this: if Nigerian government is driving economic recovery and diversification through the development and investment in agriculture and solid mineral extraction, why are these communities poor? If that is where we're expecting to get all the resources that we are going to use to develop the country, why are these poor? And we set out, these are some of the members of the team. It's not exhaustive. This team went to Ajayi. We had tourmaline being mined at Ajayi. Ajayi is in the northern part of Oyo State, very close to Benin Republic border. This team went to Itagumodi, where we had a lot of mining of gold taking place, and we also went as a group. This is not exhaustive of the members of the SFA, but these are the people that went. That's Itagumodi, and as we can see, we have here a lot of gold mining taking place, and at Ajayi we have tourmaline red, tourmaline green. That's just an area view of the two communities. Again, Itagumodi is situated in a valley, and as you can see from this, the community is here where you have that square. That allows a flow of heavy metal carrying sediments from different parts, and because a lot of the gold that is mined there are alluvial gold. And we have also accompanied that some heavy metals. And the first thing to note from our findings is that despite that agriculture and solid mineral extraction, they are very intensive with respect to land use. It became apparent that all the policies of government did not take that into consideration. That there was none in terms of either provision for the complex land tenure system or for the intensity of the activities and their consequences. So today, even though there is a law that vests mining, land use rights on the governor of the state, you only find that operating in the cities or where government has interest. When you then go to the communities, whether for mining or for agriculture, you then have to relate or negotiate with family members. So we have this kind of land use right coexisting, and that's not captured. In the case of Itagumodi, for example, people who are interested in mining approaches government, government gives them licenses, then they go back to the communities where they're going to do this mining and have to confront the family members. And the people are saying that, oh, these are family land, but the miner is saying the government has given me license. So, and that created a lot of tension. And the summary of all that we have observed is also that mining activities have impacted the host communities negatively. We do know that the consequences of mining are negative, but in the context of this, I will expatiate that by some of the pictures that we saw in terms of both the physical, intra, as well as inter-community social relationships, as well as ethnic tensions. Rather than enhance economic development of the community by the migration of people and cross-cultural interactions, rather we have found that these were breaking down the fabrics as well as the connections within each community as well as between communities. Sad to note, but very obvious and expected, traditional as well as political leaders have exploited the situation for personal gains. In Ibadan community, interestingly, that's where I was born and that's where I was raised. The community had an agreed beneficiation scheme, but because it is traditional in Nigeria, in any community in Nigeria, that when you get to the community you want to do anything as a non-indigent, the first point of call is to approach the leader of the community and register your presence. But that's the point at which they then corner the people and then bypass the established community relationship or the community system. We noticed that more than 70% of the mining activities are just open pit mining, and as we can see, the primary occupation that we have there, people are predominantly farmers initially, but you see that eventually mining has been displacing farming. And even though majority of the people don't like that, but we see that mining is displacing agriculture in these communities that are predominantly agrarian, and some of the effects that people pointed out are listed there. We also saw erosion of traditions and culture in terms of language, food, music, religious worship. I'll talk to that through some pictorial representation. We saw a lot of mining-induced prostitution taking place within the communities. We It also affected trade and commerce. You see a shift towards mining-related businesses. And that was affecting also the community. Within a space of about 1 year, we saw that there has been a displacement of the community. The population of the miners grew to about 60% of the entire community, from a meager something less than 10% the first time that we went there. And we also saw that ethnic segregation and plural traditional authorities were being established, and were also concurrent with increase in this mining activity. And of course, we did some water and soil assessment, as we're all aware, and we saw that there was an association of heavy metals, predominantly lead, manganese, and zinc, and with very low carbon nitrogen ratio, as well as the exchangeable cation. We saw that there's a large proportion of, and as I was mentioning to Vanessa as we were coming, Nigeria is having a challenge when it comes to youth population. Currently, the proportion of the youth is tending towards 70% of the entire Nigerian population. And that's a major issue that we have. And we have that even there has been a lot of livelihood shifts, livelihood engagement shift as a result of this, and of course, agriculture in general. Now, I will tell more of this or demonstrate them through this pictorial representation. First is to say that the artisanal mining is widespread, but it's still very crude. As you can see, you will, after digging this out, they believe that's where you have the gold, then he has to go and wash it. Sometimes they are not as contiguous as the photograph shows. It may mean that you will have to carry it over a distance. And here is the gold that they have found. After washing it, as you can see, the alluvial gold, that's what you have. Shining here is the same thing that we have in that place. And you also see, these are sediment areas that have been abandoned, and you then have small children like these family members going there, thinking that they also could take some of these things, go and wash, perhaps they'll find some gold during their free time. And there's no scientific basis for searching for gold. They call this, so this is the kind of line, fault, that they're tracing. And we see that they're digging deep down is following this because they believe that it leads to gold. That's what they told us. And you can see this man pulling a rope by which to go deep down into that pit that had been dug. And there are no basic equipment and have a lot of risk associated with that. But while we're going through that, we saw that China is gradually moving in. We just encountered this. They were building that. In relation to also the physical environment, we also saw that the miners were using cocoa, some of the crops. We all eat chocolate, and chocolate is all these chocolate drinks from cocoa. And these are cocoa plant, trees. They were using cocoa as indicator plants, believing that once the cocoa plant is wilting, it means the root has hit gold. So when they get licenses without even recourse to the farmers, they move into the farms. And you see a lot of this destruction taking place. And there's an interesting story of this guy. He is from Benin Republic. He's not a Nigerian. And we got there, he was smoking hemp and all these kind of hard drugs he was using, but he's a supervisor. The interesting thing is that the farm where he's doing his mining, extracting, happens to be the farm. He happens to be dating the daughter of the farm owner. And the younger brother of the lady he was dating was then allowed to come and be selling food. So that's the kind, we met a 13-year-old boy who we then asked why. He then said, oh, this man is dating my sister. And because of that, he gave me the privilege. My mother would prepare yam and stew. I could take there and and sell because he is the supervisor. But at the same time, he also used that to get access to the farm. The relationships were not the determinant of his access, but he initiated the relationship with the lady as a kind of security cover to prevent him from being displaced and to be able to have a social acceptance in the community. And again, you see in the background there we have plantain and banana. Plantain and banana goes along with cocoa because when cocoa plants are young, we use the plantain plant as shade plants to ensure that the cocoa seedlings are protected from the scorching of the sun. And thereafter, we just leave them because the two cohabit easily. But we could see a lot of destruction still, like I said earlier on, that we have a lot of crude method of system. And so that's the same man. That's the pit through which they go. Underground, you have an extensive network of dog channels that people move through. But that's the one they go through and ramifies under the soil surface, just seeking alluvial gold. They will just get the mud out and go and wash, and from there they start. Perhaps the only machine that we saw across there is just the pumping machine there, just to pump out water, because basically this is a valley, and all year round, by the time they dig deeper because of the high water table, the place could be flooded. And the same thing, we have plantain, banana plant, and that's our administrator. I'm sure Anthony will recognize Grace. So that's Nigeria SFA administrator, and we went to the field and you could see that she looked a bit scared as we are trying to. We thought it's something we could go, and in another pit I was standing there, trying to imagine how people access that on a daily basis. And see, have a lot of water accumulation there. We also have that as evidence of destruction of the physical environment. I call this an invasive community. Unlike Itagumodi, where the mining and the community exist side by side, contiguous, the mining camp for Tomalin in Iboja is spatially isolated. And like I talked earlier on about land ownership rights, this land is purely farmland, about more than 50 kilometers to Iboja community. But because the land is part of the traditional right of the community, it's still recognized as part of the community. This was non-existent 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It was just a farmer that just noticed a shining stone, and he took it to the community, and somebody said, this is precious stone, money. And that's how this community grew. So it's purely a mining camp. And all the people who are there, they migrated from different parts of the country and from outside the country. We met at least 4 nationals when we went here. Gambian, we met people from Sierra Leone, and the majority of the others were from the northern part. So that's why I call it an invasive mining community. This an area photograph, and we can see the mining pits that they have dug across the landscape. The same, and it's interesting that as deep as this and extensive as this is, they are done manually. It's very, and you can see the destruction that has taken place. And what you have there are pockets of ponds where they wash whatever they excavate from the pit. And what I'm showing here is just to show how close the pits they have dug are also to the community or to where they stay. And we've had different kind of accidents reported. But essentially because it's just a mining camp, and all that you have there are just makeshift structures that people, so when we went to Itagumodi, we're not talking about the social interaction. Of course, as we were arriving, the first point of call was to go to the king. Interestingly, the king himself has been displaced from the community. He has had to move out of the community and now stay in another community. So we're directed to go and see the secretary. And the secretary is the second from the left, after the administrator, the man wearing the red cap. So that's the secretary of the community. The interesting thing about this photograph is it also tells a lot of story. That's his wife's shop. And we saw that for the first time, the woman was no longer selling wares, but mining-related materials. And head pans, shovels, diggers. That was not the case 6 months earlier when we went to the community. Because we're not just interacting first with the man. So we saw, and all this that you see, this is a detergent. Everywhere the miners go, that's what they used to have their bath and wash their machine, wash their clothes. So everywhere we went, we saw that even the commerce was now influenced by the mining activities. You can see the kind of water that the community use. These are our people. So here is the one in the roof back, taking samples of the water for the analysis that we did. And see children in the community also having their bath. And at the same time, they will fetch water from this pond or stream and take back home to cook, to do other things. But this is a sachet very close to the slippers of the detergent that I was showing earlier. That they also, everything point into that. And you can see, you would not see this kind of dirt if you approach any community in the southern part of Nigeria. That is traditionally the community. This kind of waste that you see typifies a community where you have migrants of the northern origin. And you have, and it's because of the relationship they have with the physical environment is different from what you have. And you have it also relating to the plastics problem. We, as part of the engagement process, we had meetings with the women. A lot of the men have abandoned them in the community. They have left. It's typical of Itagumodi that their men move out of the community. Perhaps this is the only motorized pump that the entire community has. As we're moving around the community, we then encounter this group of young teenagers seated behind me there. They are from the northern part of Nigeria. They just woke up in the morning, no work to do. But we had to give them money to eat that money. And they do not speak the language. They knew no one there, but they came all the way from the north. So we are seeing a migration also induced by the Boko Haram and security challenges that we have. And there's that drift towards anywhere there's physical job. They don't go to school, they have no education, but we had, so the lady in red is a master's student I was supervising, but who happened to understand the language. So we took her along, not only as a research student, but also as an interpreter. And moving along, we talked about the plurality of traditional institutions. The man wearing green is the deputy Seriki Hausa. Seriki is the title of the Hausa head. Even though they are within a Yoruba community that has its own traditional institution, they established a parallel traditional institution for the simple reason that they were now in the majority in the community, even though all of them were migrants. And all the people that you saw, the men standing there, with the exception of this man who is part of our research team and leading the socio-economic group, all the others, they live in this house. It's a 6-bedroom apartment. The family reserved one room. I rented out the other 5 to this. All these guys are married, but their wives are not here. Their wives are at least 500 to 750 kilometers away in the northern part. But the man just reserved one room for himself, his wife, and one of his daughters. We saw the daughters. The daughter was a 13-year-old secondary school girl. He sells fish. He will fry the fish, and display it just behind where this lady was standing, selling to this people. And so we had that plural authority established, but you also see that a lot of the Hausa people defer to this man, and he is the deputy and the substantive head, not to the traditional ruler of the native community. And so we had a lot of stories behind both this building as well as, so when we were talking to them, they told us that we had to go and talk to their deputy, the head of their own association, so to say. And again, we encountered another set, and the story behind this is that these people are just motorbike riders. They provide transportation services to the miners. But they were brought in by the miners from the north. So they killed the business for the locals and were standing in front of the house of the man. That's the living room of the man. The man who was seated on the other photograph, he is a mechanic, motorcycle mechanic. He said they have been sent out of business because the miners, because they are Hausa, they will not bring their bike for repair to a non-Hausa man. They brought the riders, they also brought the mechanics, all the way from the north. So he took us in. He himself had a failed business in the city, and he said he decided to relocate to a village to reduce his cost of living, as well as to earn some money, to recover and go back to the city. But he found himself in this situation. But they could also not talk because these people are in the majority. And see, on the other side, the man was preparing food. We saw that in the morning. You have on the floor there chicken he has slaughtered that he was going to prepare to sell. And by evening, we were coming back. That's the food he has prepared for sale. You won't find anybody eating this kind of food who's a native in the southern part of Nigeria. They soak the egg, the yam in egg and fried it, chicken, or that's the kind of food they eat. That's what he has prepared. Again, the same photograph I showed earlier. This man is also a migrant, but he was a farmer. So he had experienced that and he volunteered. That's his house. That's his kitchen. And you see members of his family enjoying themselves around the house while we're having the interview. But I wanted to show that because it also, all this shows the level of poverty. It's not just, it shows that does not typify the economy or the social situation in Nigeria, but it typifies the level of poverty that you have within this community. And that's the health center. As you can see, the lady there is the community health officer. We met her as dressed, treating somebody in the clinic. And you could see this man's hand, that's in Ajayi. That was also a product of the tension and friction between the miners as well as community people. This was in my village. Interestingly, that is also one of the buildings I had my primary education. And by the time we went back, that's the way it still is. And again, this is Igoja, that's Itagumoji, showing the level of abandonment from both government, despite the fact that on a daily basis, the miners pay fees. They give them receipts and they pay levies before they go to the field. This is the central mosque at Itagumoji till today, and that's the church. The interesting thing about the mosque, while I showed it, we went on a Friday, and we were in the community when it was time for Jumat prayers. They said the prayer in Hausa language, not in Yoruba, which is the traditional language of the community, because the miners are now in a majority. And we then approached the chief imam of the community. Why is this? He said, well, shall we say? The community head has been displaced, and he has relocated, and the Hausa people are taking over the community. And everybody was crying out and saying, oh, since you have come, maybe you can help us. This, as it looked abandoned, it was to be on Friday, you will see all over the place, around on the streets, that you have people there. That was the woman that was being treated when we got there. They claimed that she was a sex worker and that there was an attack. So we found she was being treated by the community health worker, and you could see the basin where she was being treated. And that's the situation of the health center at the time that we got there. Lastly, arising from all this, we had engagement with policymakers. And I personally had phone interaction and meetings with the governor and the deputy governor of the state, alerting them to the security situation in that community, where you have this rising migrant population and the displacement of culture, values, as well as the identities of the community. I personally spoke also to the Commissioner of Police for the state, drawing her attention to the situation in the community, and that if nothing was done, the community is likely to be consumed with this ethnic tension. The Director General of the Nigerian Chamber of Commerce and Industry was also a native of that locality. I spoke to him and made presentation, and as I'm talking today, SFA has been appointed as a consultant for the Nigerian Chamber of Commerce and Industry on any matter relating to mining. But Femi, who is there, where we are with the young Hausa people, and those of us who are in Uganda, you will recognize him. He's not the face of SFA. He's now a senior special assistant to the state governor. And so he is still a member of the organization. Those are some of the areas that we have made impact. And we also wrote a paper for the Dawn Commission. Dawn is the development agenda for Western Nigeria. Dawn Commission. And if you have been reading in the papers in the last 1 or 2 weeks, there was this regional security outfit called Amotekun. The submission that we made was part of the background presentations that led to that. And the idea is that we now have a regional security outfit in the southwestern part of Nigeria that is also saddled with the responsibility of, among other things, look into these cultural tensions, ethnic conflicts, as well as banditry, kidnapping, and be able to arrest this. So in a nutshell, this are what we've been doing so far, and I want to thank you for your attention.